What I can tell you from my weekend vacation is that I pick really, really good times to go on vacation. Okay, that's a little bit of a joke. Got a lot of thoughts on a lot of different topics, but let's kick it off and talk about Kedon Young. 2 weeks into his sojourn as BYU basketball coach, he's done a lot of good things, all having divided attention. What can he do as he now begins the job in earnest? Let's discuss on today's show.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. I appreciate all of you for being everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Of course, the motto is your team every day, and as such, we are your original daily podcast focused on all things BYU sports, and we are brought to you today by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. All right, as I mentioned, I spent the weekend out of town, had a chance to get down to southern Utah, play some golf, spend some time with my wife and kids, explore a little bit of Red Rock country, and a lot happened in the BYU sports universe while I was out of the office, as they say. But let me just start here today. Kedon Young, folks, what a job this guy is doing 2 weeks into his job. Remember, it was 2 weeks. So I'm recording this Monday night, but it'd be coming to most of you on Tuesday. 2 weeks ago was when he was formally introduced as BYU men's basketball coach. In that time, he's made one assistant hire in Brandon Dunstan. By all reports, Brandon's been an absolute home run hire as the first assistant hired for Kedon Young's staff. I am assuming that more hires are coming very, very soon as Kedon Young really steps into the fray now as his job as BYU men's basketball coach begins in earnest, honestly, today/yesterday as the Phoenix Suns were eliminated from the NBA playoffs. So Kedon Young, like I mentioned, hiring an assistant coach, offering a number of 4- and 5-star prospects. Oh, yeah, he happened to retain two of the brightest stars on BYU's basketball team from last year in Dallin and Richie Saunders. When it seemed like all hope was lost, that two of the brightest players from BYU's roster were going to run off to Kentucky in the case of Richie Saunders, and in the case of Dallin to the highest bidder, it felt like, NIL-wise. Kedon Young works his magic and gets those two to agree to return to BYU. And I'm sure there's some agreements NIL-wise that are taking care of these young men. I get all that. But Kedon Young is working miracles early on in his tenure. Now, all of that obviously has to parlay into him proving it on the court with his X's and O's and his just being a tactician and finally having the lead job, being there, standing on the sidelines, calling timeouts, monitoring the game, making those insertions of guys into the lineup and pulling guys out when they're not playing effectively enough. All of that is still yet to come. But 2 weeks into his tenure as BYU men's basketball coach, can you really say anything? I mean, anything has been bad or not great in the Kedon Young or the KYU universe? I don't think you can. And that's a very, very impressive thing to think about because this is a guy that was off most of our radars. I'll be honest, I had heard his name as being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and him being on that short-ish list of potential candidates for the BYU men's basketball head coaching position. But this is a guy, remember, just a couple of weeks ago was a hot shot prospect to be one of the next NBA head coaches in the National Basketball Association. BYU scooped him up, has brought him in, and he has been absolutely masterful in how he's handled this job while also making sure that he gave his undivided attention as much as humanly possible to the Phoenix Suns and their run in the playoffs. Now, people I'm sure would be saying that, well, Phoenix got swept, so his attention was divided. Let's be real. The Phoenix situation is that Phoenix has three major superstars and not a lot else beyond that outside of Grayson Allen, and the Minnesota Timberwolves dismantled them limb from limb. So congrats to Minnesota, and I got my wish because I was thinking I wanted Kedon Young focusing on this job full time as soon as possible. And it took just about a week and a half for that ultimately to come to fruition. But I have been thoroughly impressed with Kedon Young. Offers are flying around, like I said, to 4- and 5-star talents. And on our next couple of editions of the podcast, I'm going to dig more into those players, get you a feel for what I understand about them, what they could offer to BYU if they were to pick BYU as their college destination of choice. And we'll also talk more about transfer portal targets for BYU. We're also going to talk about basketball coach assistant hires. Like I said, I pick really, really good times to go on vacation. But the nice part is I wanted to get on today and riff a little bit on why I think Kedon Young has been a home run hire for BYU. I said this once, I'll say it again. The situation was, as I understand it from multiple people, is that Kedon Young turned down the Brooklyn Nets job in whatever capacity it was for reasons. It was what I was told. There were reasons why he turned it down. That decision to turn down that position allowed BYU to get in the mix to bring him to Provo as BYU men's basketball coach. His wife obviously played a role in that, but in the 2 weeks since that hire was finalized, announced, and celebrated, obviously, with that show on BYU TV 2 Tuesdays ago, I have been just absolutely floored with what Kedon Young has been able to accomplish at this point. The way this BYU roster is shaping up right now, yes, you are going to lose Spencer Johnson. Jaxson Robinson, he officially announced he's entering the transfer portal as well as declaring for the NBA draft a couple of days ago as well. He's most likely going to be elsewhere next season. And then Ali Khalifa. Those are the 3 guys you have lost from this roster for BYU. And barring any late decisions to exit the program outside of Atiki Ali Atiki, BYU's roster coming back next year has one hole with regards to a big man, a center, to protect the rim and obviously provide some prowess offensively. But beyond that, who's to say that BYU's roster is not extremely strong right now? That's the good news. And oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this just a couple episodes ago. There's this young man named Brody Kozlowski, who's a 4-star prospect who was signed, sealed, and delivered to the BYU basketball program. And he looks like a future 4-man of the highest variety for BYU in their Big 12 era. He's 6'7", shoots the 3 at a very high clip. And like I said, he's going to play that 4 spot for the Cougars, where they're going to be able to really play at least 4 out, 1 in. And if really need be, if they can find the right type of center, you can play 5 out and really attack teams that way. Kedon Young is known as an offensive genius, and you can imagine some of the stuff he's got dreamed up for guys like Dallin Hall and Richie Saunders, and in this case, Brody Kozlowski, to utilize their strengths in his offense and his designs for this BYU basketball team. So I'll just go back to the well one more time. What an impressive hire it was to get Kedon Young out of the NBA and bring him to BYU. And he has done little, if anything. And I can't think of anything off the top of my head that leads me to think that he is not going to be a smash success early on in his run at BYU, because the first 2 weeks he has kind of hit all the high notes, and he continues to ring up hit after hit after hit for the BYU basketball program. And that should excite you as a Cougar fan. And obviously we'll have plenty of coverage to come here on the podcast as we continue to dissect things from the BYU basketball perspective. Like I said, in a couple of episodes later this week, I have plans to sit down and really get to know some of the prospects that he's offered of late, because I don't proclaim to know them offhand and be able to rattle off what exactly they're going to offer to BYU. So we'll dig into that. We'll also dig into transfer portal targets and what ultimately his assistant coaching pool, speaking of Kedon Young, could look like when he finally gets here. It gets obviously ingrained with what's going on at BYU, gets his guys through the hiring process, and then really, in all honesty, gets to work as the head coach of the BYU basketball program. He's done this about half of the time with his split attention on this. What can he do when he has 100% undivided attention on the BYU basketball program? It's a scary proposition, but an exciting one if you're a Cougar fan. All right, coming up here in just a minute, we're going to talk about a new addition to the BYU football roster that I think has the potential to be another smashing success. Now, comes in a little bit of a pint-sized package, but I will tell you, people are extremely high on this young man. And I got to say, with my own eyes, I have been absolutely floored by him since he was a sophomore in high school. I'll explain more next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, Game Time is here for you, my friends, if you want to get out to the NBA playoffs this season. They are an authorized ticket marketplace with the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app, actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. So if you're thinking about going out to watch one of these NBA playoff games, you live in one of the markets where they're at, I am dreaming of the day that NBA playoff basketball is back here in Utah. It feels like it might be a little ways off, but regardless, you can get out to the games you want to go to with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying your NBA tickets. They want you guys to go enjoy the event and look forward to going to it rather than having to hunt high and low to find the right tickets for you. The best part is, like I said, the lowest price guarantee. They will credit 110% of the difference if you find better seats in the same row that you bought tickets from Game Time on. That's why they're all-in pricing. Toggling that feature shows you exactly what you're paying up front. All in. No surprise fees popping up at the end to jack up the price for you guys. So get on it today and take the guesswork out of buying your NBA tickets with our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, we just talked about the NBA and also the NHL playoffs are underway. Baseball is in full swing. How about that walk-off home run for Mitch Garver and the Seattle Mariners last night, everybody? How about the Mariners? Watch out, boys. Okay, it's a little bit early on the season, but I'm excited about my Mariners. Their pitching staff is absolutely dominating. The best part is no matter what you're into, FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game right now. New customers, you get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use, my friends. They want to make it as simple as possible for you. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win. Once again, $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose. It's all courtesy of your friends at FanDuel. So once again, go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. I want to remind you guys, if you've been watching Fox Sports or ESPN or any of the other sports networks out there, have to turn down that volume because all the shouting going on from all the talking heads. Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming going on the other networks. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, of course, your team every day. All right. BYU football got a big pickup over the weekend with the announcement of Utah State quarterback McCae Hillstead announcing that he will play at BYU as a transfer into the BYU football program. Now, let me be very upfront about this. McCae Hillstead is not the home run signing via the transfer portal I think some BYU fans hoped would come to save them from the quarterback situation, because it comes from a lower level, the G5 ranks in Utah State. Obviously, that's going to cause some people to pause. The other thing about this is McCae Hillstead is not the biggest guy in the entire world. He is generously listed, I think, at 5'10". He probably weighs $180, $190. But the one thing I love about McCae Hillstead is I have been watching and covering this young man since he was a sophomore in high school. He is now a sophomore at BYU, suiting up for the BYU football program. He grew up in Springville, Utah, a stone's throw away from BYU. Ultimately enrolled and played high school football at Skyridge High School. If you guys know where that's up in Lehigh, he was absolutely dynamite from the second I watched him when he played at Skyridge. I had the crazy thing happen to me is I called one of my first games for KSL Sports Rewind solo. It was the very first start of the McCae Hillstead era at Skyridge. And I'll tell you this much. Skyridge didn't know what was about to hit him. A lot of Utah high school football didn't know what was about to hit them. But this kid had flat out sprinter speed on the football field. And he was generously 5'10" at that point, maybe $140, it felt like, in terms of his weight. But the one thing is, if you can't be hit, you can't be hurt as a quarterback. Now, how is that translated over the college level? He actually had a pretty decent run last season at Utah State. He ended up starting 4 of the 8 games he played and threw for just over 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions with a 59.5% completion percentage. Now, I can tell you there were multiple college scouts, and I would imagine that BYU was among them, that wrote him off due to his size in high school. He is undersized at 5'10". There's absolutely no doubt he is an undersized quarterback. But Once again, I called games during his sophomore, junior, and senior season at the high school level. And every time I saw him with my own eyes, he felt like he got better and better and better. Now, I talked with people in the lead up to him ultimately signing with Utah State in the recruiting circles and said, what is he missing? And they said, Jake, it's really nothing other than the fact that teams are afraid he's not big enough. And big enough meaning at 5'10", and I think he was probably weighing 160 to 170 at that point in high school. They were just afraid that he was too small to compete at the FBS level. Well, Utah State took a chance on him. And Utah State, I thought, got some pretty decent production out of this young man. And BYU, I think, watched that from afar, like a lot of programs do at the Power 4 level now, saw that he could produce at that level and said, you know what? We like this kid. We liked what he had in terms of his overall prowess on the football field, but some of our concerns may have been allayed here by the fact that he is produced at the G5 level. Can he do that at the Power 4 level? Let's bring him in. This is a kid, like I said, from Utah County. He is born and raised Utah County boy, and I know that he will wear that with pride to be representing the school that's in his proverbial backyard at BYU. Is he going to come in and compete for playing time right away for BYU? I can't say that because my conversations with BYU folks about that very thing got crickets in response. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. You can read into that however you will. But I do believe that McCae Hillstead has the goods to compete for playing time for BYU. At minimum, I think he comes into training camp this year for BYU, and I believe that he will compete for that third quarterback job at bare minimum alongside Trayson Bourget. I think it's still a two-man race right now between Jake Retzloff and Gary Bohannon to be the starter this year for BYU, but do not discount what McCae Hillstead can offer at the Power Force level for BYU football. Kalani Sitake, Aaron Roderick, Matt Mitchell, the quarterback's coach, even though he's a analyst, all the guys involved in this, I'm sure Fesi Sitake had a role in this. They don't sign off on bringing this kid in if they do not think that he can compete at BYU. It's just, it's insane to think that they would do that, give a kid a scholarship to bring him in and say, you know what, you're just going to sit on the bench here. They know they have to get guys that can come in and compete for playing time because that quarterback position, it's got huge question marks in it right now for BYU. We talked about this ad nauseum for months now. Is it Jake Retzloff? Is it Gary Bohannon? Is BYU need to hit the transfer portal to find the right guy for them to lead them into year 2 of the Big 12 Conference? Enter McCae Hillstead. Is McCae going to be capable of coming into training camp, picking up that playbook faster than really anybody else will have to? Because a lot of these guys like Gary Bohannon have already played in this offense from his time at Baylor, just the bare minimum, the nuts and bolts of what this offense is built upon. He has a leg up on McCae Hillstead. Hillstead's going to have a lot of ground to make up if he really expects to compete for playing time this season for the Cougars, but I think he understands that. I think he is embracing that challenge as he comes to Brigham Young University to compete for playing time. I mentioned it earlier. He's a kid that is going to wear that badge of honor for representing BYU because I think he grew up watching BYU and he's got a very, very strong connection to the Valley. And I think that Utah State gave him his opportunity. He proved what he's capable of, and to have just a shade under 60% completion percentage in limited minutes, splitting time at quarterback. And he did suffer some injuries. He had a concussion at one point during his time at Utah State. So obviously you have to deal with the medical concerns of all that. But BYU wouldn't bring this kid in if they didn't think that he could come in and absolutely charge that quarterback room. There are some quarterbacks probably sitting in that quarterback room saying, what does this mean for me? Well, I've said it once, I'll say it again. I do think that there are going to be a number of quarterbacks that were in spring ball for BYU that are either playing new positions come fall camp, or B, are simply not on the roster, whether that's hit the transfer portal, whether they just stop playing football, whatever it may mean. Guys will be moving on, and McCae Hillstead moves kind of into that void that is left by some of those guys. They carried 10 guys at the start of spring ball for BYU. 2 of them left during the middle of camp. A couple more, I would imagine, are going to be gone already if they aren't all. 2 more will be gone shortly if they aren't already for BYU, I'd imagine, and that's going to thin the herd and the competition for reps. But McCae Hillstead is taking on a big challenge, stepping into what BYU is going to hope to get out of him as a quarterback. But I'm telling you, from the time he was a sophomore in high school, playing against guys who were 2 and 3 times his size. It was absolutely incredible to watch this kid do his thing. It felt like I watched time and time again, a defender would have him dead to rights. You'd think, okay, this is going to end up as a 3-yard loss. He's going to get dragged down from behind. And all of a sudden he turns on the afterburners. He gets the corner. He's off for a 40 or 50-yard touchdown run. Now, is that viable at the FBS / in this case, the Power 4 level? Probably not. But that escapability, the improvement I've seen from his mechanics throwing the football, there's a lot that screams to me that you should be excited to have McCae Hillstead suiting up for the BYU football program. And I, for one, can't wait to see what he's capable of when he finally puts on the blue and white of BYU rather than the blue and white of Utah State. I thought Utah State gave him the platform, show what he's capable of. I think it allayed some of the concerns that BYU, most particularly in this case, would have had about him, his size and his ability to contribute at the level he is playing at. And now he gets his chance to come home, quote unquote, to Provo, Utah, and show what he's capable of and put on for his hometown team in the BYU Cougars. I'm excited to see this. I'm a big McCae Hillstead fan. I have been literally since the first time I watched him as a high school athlete. I don't proclaim to have any allegiances or anything else beyond that. I'm just a fanboy of McCae Hillstead's. I'm not saying he's going to be the starting quarterback for BYU this season, but I do not rule out the potential that he comes in and competes for playing time right away for the Cougars, because he has got some of that it factor to him, and that should lend itself to him making an impression, I think, at minimum, for the BYU football program this fall. All right, we'll finish out today's edition of the podcast talking about some former Cougars who have now moved on to the professional ranks. What does it mean that only one BYU Cougar was drafted in the NFL draft over the weekend? Well, I don't think it was great, but we'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monopoly Go. Now, I will say this, my friends, it is an incredible game. Monopoly Go, it feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. There's a ton of unique ways to play this game. Mini games like digging for treasure on a robot, pachinko machine. There's always new time events to help you win big, like Midas multipliers for everything you win, or rent frenzies to help you cash in on your friends. The best part is you can build up teams with your friends for time tournaments where you work together and build up each other's boards. The best part is you also win together, which means more awesome prizes for you to unlock. That's the best part about this, is Monopoly Go is here for you guys to have fun and also cash in alongside your friends. Unique stickers, you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and of course, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. So you know what? You have a lot of fun today and do it with our friends at Monopoly Go. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it free now on Google Play or the App Store. Once again, Monopoly Go, available now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Of course, my friends, the word is game on. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for your support. If you're not done so already, please consider subscribing to our Locked On Cougars Insider group. We are passing along info. Now, I did take a little bit of a hiatus last week on it just to get away for a little bit. My wife essentially demanded that I step away and really spend some time with my kids. And it was good to get away. I'll be very clear about this, but we are getting right back to work this week with Locked On Cougars, our insider group, also with the podcast here. So if you want to be in the know and be up to date at all times on all things BYU, click the link in the show notes below. Join us. It's a 14-day free trial, $4.99 a month afterwards, and it literally comes to your phone in the form of a text message. I was golfing with a good friend on the Locked On Network, Spencer McLaughlin, yesterday at Coral Canyon Golf Course, and we had a great chat about how cool the insiders groups are. He does one for Locked On Oregon. It's just a really fun way to interact with our diehard fans of BYU, and also in this case of the podcast, and appreciate all of y'all for your support of the podcast. All right, so before we go on today's show, let's talk about the results of the NBA draft. Now, Kingsley Suamataia lands in, I think, a fantastic spot as he lands with the Kansas City Chiefs. Andy Reid loves his BYU Cougars, and his team has a need at tackle. Now, is Kingsley going to come in and start right away for Kansas City? I think where he was drafted, and actually the fact that Kansas City moved up to take him in the draft, indicates to me that they believe that he can compete for playing time right away. Is that at left tackle? Is that at right tackle? That is the question that remains to be answered, because he's got kind of that funny distinction of his, I think they said it was 1,300 some odd reps during his time at BYU. Kingsley's reps between right and left tackle were split almost nearly, if not completely down the middle, 50-50 on both sides. That offers versatility that Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs will absolutely crave, and that's why they are bringing him into the BYU, not to the BYU, to the Kansas City football roster, and he will compete for playing time right away. Now, Donovan Smith could be re-signed on a one-year deal to potentially help Kingsley get acclimated and take some of the stress off him if they do put him at left tackle. But I will say this about Kingsley. He has got all of the physical tools to be a 10-year starter in the NFL if everything goes according to plan. I think he's got that type of potential. He's got a lot of youth on his sides. He was a redshirt sophomore, for crying out loud, when he went into the NFL draft. He could have played 2 more seasons in college. He's 21 years old. And by the way, congratulations to his fiance, Nani Falatea. She just declared her signing with Oregon as a transfer. So congratulations to her. So that'll be interesting how they handle that. Her being in Oregon, obviously in Eugene, and him being in Kansas City. But regardless, congratulations to Kingsley. This is a life-changing moment. I know he and his family were very excited. The video that the Kansas City Chiefs put out, it was funny to hear Andy Reid say, "Hey, you healthy? Just making sure. Hey, and we're going to bring you in." And it looks like it's an absolutely incredible spot for Kingsley to land as a former BYU Cougar, and you wish him nothing but the best. He gets a chance to potentially chase a three-peat with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. And Mahomes, shortly after Kingsley was drafted, tweeted out, "Love that guy Veach." Speaking of Brett Veach, the GM for the Kansas City Chiefs, they brought in Xavier Worthy, who broke the NFL Combine record for speed at 4.20 seconds. If that was the number, might have been 4.21, but really incredible speed that he brings at Kansas City. And then right after Kingsley gets drafted, Patrick Mahomes like, okay, they gave me another weapon on offense. And they gave me another big guy to protect my backside out there on the field. And I'm loving things right now. The Kansas City Chiefs are set up for long-term success. They just signed Andy Reid to a long-term extension. Will take him through the end of the decade if he coaches it out. And he has a chance, if he sees that out and they continue to win at the clip they are, that he could surpass all coaches and have the most wins in NFL history at the end of his run. Incredible, incredible stuff for the Kansas City Chiefs. So congratulations, Kingsley Suamataia. That brings me to my next point. I was highly disappointed not another BYU Cougar went in the NFL draft. Now, 5 other Cougars got signed as undrafted free agents after the draft. Kedon Slovis signed very quickly with the Indianapolis Colts. Aiden Robbins signed with the Cleveland Browns. Max Tooley to the Houston Texans. Ryan Rico signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. So Andy going back to the well and bringing in Rico. But by the way, Ryan Rico, he has a chance to make that roster in Kansas City, if not the practice squad at minimum, because they let Tommy Townsend, the Scottish Hammer, as they called him, go in free agency. I think he signed with Houston, if I recall correctly. And Matt Ariza, punt god, as some people called him during his time at San Diego State, is the only other guy in Kansas City's roster, if I recall correctly, at punter. If Ryan can go in there and show what he's capable of, there's no reason to think that he can't compete for that starting job in Kansas City. And then finally, Isaac Rex, to finish off the list, signing with the Indianapolis Colts. Now, that belies one other point I should make is that Eddie Heckard is going to go to the Denver Broncos in the rookie minicamp. And if he can shake off the Jones fracture, the break he's had in his foot, and show what he's capable of, according to Jay Drew tweeted it from the Deseret News, he could find himself getting a free agent deal if the Denver Broncos sign off on him being healthy. So that's essentially 6 guys that got free agent deals after the draft. But here's the deal. Kedon Slovis was a candidate to be drafted late in the draft. Mel Kiper had him as high as maybe the 6th round. And when 6 quarterbacks went in the first 12 picks of the draft, you're thinking, okay, that board is completely shifted. Now, it did go until like the 5th round when Spencer Rattler was the next quarterback taken. It was the longest drought of non-quarterback picks in NFL draft history, I think is what somebody said out there. You would have thought that Slovis may have moved up that draft board and some team may have taken a flyer on him late in the draft. Alas, it is what it is. And the Indianapolis Colts gave him some pretty good money to sign with them as an undrafted free agent. Similar situation with Max Tooley. He got $100,000 or some odd from Houston to go down there and play for the Texans. So you're happy that these guys are getting guarantees and obviously getting their opportunity. But here's a prestige factor at play for BYU is that only one guy gets drafted from a team that you were hoping to see 2 or 3 guys get drafted from. I said last week on the podcast, the over-under mark for me was 2.5. Well, it fell well under, and I thought that BYU would get 2, so I think it would still be under that 2.5. But only get 1. was a disappointing factor for the Cougars. Now, I will also add this caveat. This is a pretty light draft class for BYU, considering some of the other classes that have come out from the Brigham Young University football program of late. So there are going to be better years and leaner years for BYU along the way. But this was one that I felt like, just with how the board was tilting and some of the hype around guys like Ryan Rico and especially Kedon Slovis, I would have thought one or two more guys would have gotten drafted for BYU. And that's a little bit of a mark on BYU, because there's been a long-standing tradition in a lot of NFL circles is the BYU guys are too old, so you don't want to take them in the draft. There's not a lot of upside with them. So you wait until they are undrafted free agents when their pressure is off. They're coming in on non-guaranteed deals to sign them to those contracts. That's kind of been that hit on BYU of late. Is that the right thing to have? Is that the right mentality for NFL teams to have? I would hope not. And I know Kalani Sitake is working hard to change that tenor. He knows what it means to be drafted or have opportunities in the NFL. He knows it's important for recruiting on his side of things. He doesn't like the fact that Utah, in a quote-unquote down year, 5 former Utes got drafted this past weekend. Just one Cougar. And trust me, there was smack being thrown back and forth between BYU and Utah fans on that very point. There is a prestige factor at play here that BYU will absolutely have to continue to fight against. And the hope is that future editions of the draft, people will stop, quote unquote, sleeping on BYU football and finally realize, you know what? If we want to get the talent out of Brigham Young University, we've got to take it with one of our picks when it comes to the 7 rounds of the NFL draft, rather than waiting for that feeding frenzy that is the underdrafted free agent deal right after the draft ends. The first hour, you're just seeing deal after deal after deal going out there. And I don't envy the agents who have to negotiate those in very, very quick succession. But regardless, it'd be nice to see BYU get more opportunities. I'm happy for Kingsley. I'm happy for the 6 other guys that got opportunities at the NFL level. And I'm happy for any other BYU players. I think I also said that Paul Miley is going to go get a training camp invite, or at least a rookie camp invite with the New York Giants. I hope all of them absolutely kill it and make the rosters that they're playing for, because more BYU Cougars in the league are going to lend themselves to BYU being able to say, okay, you want to be like that guy out there? You want to be like this guy who plays for this team? That helps them in the recruiting sphere. But young men want to see teams that are going to get them to the next level, and they want to see their name up in lights in the draft. They want to have, and the 133rd pick of the 4th round of the NFL draft is insert player name here. They want that to happen, and only have one BYU Cougar have that happen. It's a little bit disappointing from the weekend that was, but I wish nothing but the best for all these former Cougars. Go kill it. Go represent BYU the way that you know how, and I am rooting for every single one of them to beat the odds and make the active rosters, if not be a star for the teams they play for. All of them can look to the example of Chad Lewis as point A of what you can do as an undrafted free agent and really make it big in the NFL. I hope all of them get that opportunity, and we'll see ultimately what plays out in the coming days and months as NFL rookie camps, training camp, OTAs, all that stuff play out ahead of the NFL season kicking off later this fall. All right, that is it. I am back. I am back in the saddle. Appreciate all of your guys' support. Hope I brought the heat today, but I hope I didn't spoil anybody's surprises. But hey, we'll have a lot more to come this week. Like I said, I'm going to dig in more into these prospects that BYU is offering on the recruiting trail. We'll also talk about the potential of BYU assistants. Who else could join Kevin Young's staff as he really gets to work here? And more on BYU football. As always, we cover it all here. You guys know how we do here on Locked On Cougars. So big thank you once again for making it your first listen of the day. Thank you to all of you who are everydayers as well. And until tomorrow, my friends, this has been the Locked On Cougars podcast.